regaining what we lost. It's not that bad. At the end of the day, it's not that bad. Long story short, we're not going to lose as much strength or size as we may think. And like I said in the beginning, that should be comforting to know, because our beliefs are powerful. Right? Our beliefs are powerful. Our beliefs will change what we do and what we feel. So if we feel like we're sitting home during quarantine and we're just losing everything we've worked for, you could actually feel fat coming onto your stomach. And when you bend over and tie your shoes, you physically see another roll there or something, right? Or you actually look in the mirror and you're like, geez, like I lost so much size. Or it's mostly in your head probably, because it's not going to be that bad. Yes, we're going to lose some, but it's not that bad. And we're going to focus here on strength and size. So because I think most of the audience here are probably more interested in strength and size. And honestly, what else is there other than strength and size? Just kidding. I laugh at endurance on here because I'm not a runner. I don't know how people run. I usually tell my wife that if I ever talk to her and I say that I'm running, that means that I'm running away from something and I'm in danger. So come help me. I used to swim for cardio in college at their pool, and I absolutely loved it. But not much of a runner. But the conversation for runners would be very different. Similar but different. But more the endurance conversation. We're going to focus on strength and size. 2 studies that I want to talk about. One is from Blazovic in 2007, and the resources here at the end. The video from Mike Zerdos in Mass goes into the study too, but we're just going to touch on the basics a little bit. What they did was they had people train for 10 weeks, then they took 3 months off. Okay, so they trained for 10 weeks, took 3 months off, and they lost in that time about 5 weeks of the strength that they gained, from the previous 10 weeks, and a non-significant amount of size. Again, just brushing the surface of that study just to give you guys some numbers and some ideas. Then there's the Starin study from way back in 1991. And basically what they did was they trained for 20 weeks, and then they took 30 weeks off. And again, both of these are time completely off. In that 30 weeks off, the subjects lost about 13% strength. Don't take that number as anything solid. It's just to show that it wasn't that much, okay? And then after 6 weeks of retraining, so trained for 20 weeks, 30 weeks off, they trained again for 6 weeks. They surpassed their strength and size from before the layoff, okay? And size had a similar effect as strength in that study. Small decrease, and then it jumped up after the 6 weeks to above what they were prior. So again, I don't want to take those numbers or like weeks and weeks of training, weeks off as like specific parameters. I just want to offer you some evidence that it's probably not going to be that bad. And again, that was time completely off, and most of us have been doing something at home, so I would imagine it would be much different, much better for us. So we want to pick our battles here. When we're getting back to the gym, we want to kind of categorize exercises as high skill, low skill, and we want to consider the amount of eccentric loading that the exercise requires, and also novelty. So important here because there are some that we can push more than others. Exercises of high skill are things like the compound movements, like squat, right? Deadlift. These type of things, there's going to be skill, not only brute strength, right? there's gonna be skill. There's gonna be that coordination, those neural adaptations that have to come back if we haven't been able to put a barbell on our back and we've been doing body weight squats, or, in our house. That we have to get used to that again. We have to get used to loading our bodies like that. Something of low skill would be like a preacher curl, right, or something like that. Preacher curls probably don't have that much skill to them. That's probably more just pure strength that we want to get back in doing that. So again, we want to keep that in mind as we're choosing exercises and choosing progressions when we get back into this stuff. Eccentrics are going to be important because it's going to affect soreness. And like we said, soreness, we're going to be more susceptible to soreness going into this. And what we don't want to have one session where we get so sore that then the next week of training is hindered. We don't want that. We want to just hit it and then stop. Hit it and stop and keep hitting it and progressing. We don't want to kill ourselves and then have that affect us moving down the road. Exercises that have a heavy eccentric aspect to them are things like Romanian deadlifts, right? Good mornings, Bulgarian split squats, or rear foot elevated split squats, right? You get into that deep hole and then come back up. You're getting a stretch in your glutes that you may not be used to under load. Even things like lunges, right? Walking lunges have hit the leg muscles in a certain way where you're getting that eccentric lowering, and flies too, right? Like if all you've been doing is push-ups for your chest, and then you go do a pec deck fly, and nice slow eccentric until you're fully stretched. That's a big eccentric for your chest. You have to keep that in mind. And the novelty aspect of these things. Novelty will make us sore. Just trying something new will make us sore, right? I've done, my wife does a virtual bar class, right? Bar, not like mixing drinks and stuff. Bar is like a mixture of like Pilates, yoga, ballet, and she's been doing it. And I did a class with her, right? I did a class. Don't judge me. Something to try. And I was sore, right? I was sore not because I didn't have the strength to do it, not because I was out of shape. It was the novelty of it, right? I've never done those movements before. If I went out and ran 10 miles, I'm sure I could plow through it somehow, but I would be sore as heck because my body's not used to that, right? I haven't been gradually exposed to that. So how does this pertain to returning to the gym? We're going to get into, like I said, the athlete coming up for the example, but if you've been doing body weight squats at home, right, and maybe walking lunges, then you go back to the gym and you see that leg press machine. Oh, that sweet leg press machine, or that hack squat machine, right? Oh, and you just get in there and you smell the rubber on it and you just grab it, right? You load it up. You get that real deep squat, like that deep, like heel to crotch squat, and you come back up and it feels so great. That is going to give you soreness. Why? Because it's new, right? You haven't used that machine in a while. You've been training your legs, yes, but the novelty of the exercise will cause soreness. So these 4 things, high skill, low skill, eccentrics, and novelty, are all things that we want to keep in mind when we're picking exercises and picking which ones to progress and picking which ones to push. So how should we track, or how do we know when to push it? How do we know when to pull back? It's difficult to say, right? Our bodies communicate with us in many different ways. It's soreness is one way to do it, but it's not always great, right? Because like we said, you can get sore from just novelty, from a new movement, and just the heavy eccentric portion of an exercise, right? However, soreness could also be indicative of muscle damage, which then can, decrease future performance, like we talked about. So soreness is good, but it has its limitations. Fatigue, we can look at fatigue, right? Audit yourself. How do you feel? How do you feel today? Things like session RPE, right? How did that session feel? Sleep quality and quantity? Are we getting disrupted sleep, are we finding a correlation between the way that we sleep and the way that we feel and our session RPE and our fatigue, right? All these things are going to come into play, and mood too, right? Are we sad? Are we just down? And is it because we're doing too much too soon? All of these things shouldn't be the first time that you've heard these things, but they all affect how we progress. And that's why it's important to always audit yourself holistically. Always audit yourself, and use auto-regulation, right? Auto-regulate your training, because all of these moving parts are going to impact the session. It's going to impact how we progress.